Hey guys, real quick before you watch this video, I really want to invite you to visit emergeamericas.com so you can link up for next year's conference and follow them on all social media because they have some really incredible content. They're doing some amazing things for tech and startup and entrepreneurs in Miami. So really don't miss out. You know, there were way more speakers than these. There's gonna be a lot more speakers next year. So check them out.
To close out with the most powerful keynote panel that we're gonna have here today. So without further ado, I wanna introduce the founder and CEO of AROD Corp, Alex Rodriguez, the chairman of CNBC, Mark Hoffman, the chairman of NBC Universal International Group, Cesar Conde, and he's also chairman of NBC Telemundo Enterprises, and CNBC's moderator, Melissa Lee.
I will start off with you, Alex Rodriguez, because I don't know if a lot of people realize this, but you've been in the business community for a very long time, and you're a very busy guy. You have a couple of new broadcasting deals that you're signing and working on. Can you tell us about where you are right now?
Yeah, well, I just retired. Hello, everyone. Thank you for having us. I just retired less than a year ago in August, and a lot of people don't know this. I've been running my business for over 18 years. It started with a small duplex down there in Biscayne, and then I bought 60 units. I thought it was all the money in the world, and I remember being in Seattle at the time, and half my time was worrying about trying to hit Pedro Martinez. The other half was hoping that my tenants paid the rent so I can cover my monthly expense. And today we've grown that to managing over 15,000 apartment units in 12 states. We have 400 people that work for AROD Corp, and we've built an incredible management team, and it's taken me, kind of my 10,000 hours in the business community to do that. And as of late, I've entered the media world, and it's fun, it's exciting, and it's hard. And doing a little bit of Fox, I have Shark Tank, and I recently signed with GMA in Nightline. So I am busy, and I have two beautiful daughters that live here in Miami. One goes to Ransom, one goes to St. Stephen's. And when I tell people that my daughter goes to Ransom, they think she's adopted. So.
How important to you is the fact that you are the first Hispanic shark on Shark Tank? I mean, when you think about your media presence and your brand presence, for that matter, how do you think about being a role model?
First of all, I'm incredibly proud to be the first Hispanic shark. It's something that we talked about with the producers at ABC. It's something that they were very excited about. But one of the things, and I think in Miami we have a really good idea of how powerful the Hispanic community is, but in a whole, I think we're coming, the metrics say that, but I mean the fact that we contribute over $1 trillion annually to the U.S. economy is just a phenomenal feat. And just think about what it's going to be in 10 and 20 years. And I think in DC and other business communities, we should be having really smart conversation on how to double that number.
And Cesar, of course, you've been thinking about this issue for a very long time. How has that changed more recently? And have you noticed that more of the mainstream media realizes that it is important to tap into this very important community?
Yeah, look, first of all, thank you, Melissa, as always, and it's great to share the stage with Alex and Mark. And thank you and congratulations again to Manny, the whole eMerge team. It's just for those of us who are Miami natives, we're so proud to see this event, how far it's come in the first few years, and we think we have a long way to go. So it's very exciting. Congratulations. To pick up on your question, I think many of us in this room, we know, as Alex was touching on, the growth of the Latino community here in the States. We're at 57 plus million strong. We're about 18% of the population. So I think the story of the size and growth of the Hispanic population is out there, but I think the story that is really starting to come into the limelight is this consumer purchasing power story, right? So it's not just the numbers, now it's the amount of consumer spending power. So they have $1 trillion plus. To put that in context of consumer spending power, if they were its own country, standalone country, they would be the 12th largest economy in the world, somewhere between Russia and Australia. And so any brand, any business that's looking to find growth, certainly here in the United States, has that incredible potential right in their backyard. And that's a very, very powerful story for all industries. And clearly for us at NBC Universal, we also have that interest, and Telemundo has been a big priority for us. We've invested a tremendous amount, and we're starting to see those results, and we couldn't be more excited.
And it's also an aspirational community, and I think, Mark, maybe way back when CNBC had the rap of being the channel for people with money, which typically is not a very diverse audience, but we've really come a long way in terms of how we think about our audience and who should watch and who wants to watch CNBC.
Well, that's right, and just to underline what Cesar said, we've now been a part of this conference for since the beginning. This is the biggest ever, the best ever. It continues to scale. That's what you want all businesses to do, and this one is scaling in a really dramatic and exciting way. So, my hat's off to Manny Medina and the whole crew that puts this together. When we think about the evolution of the CNBC brand, we were really very focused on the investor and what was relevant and important to investors, companies, economies, how money moves around the world. And what we found is that increasingly we're hearing more and more from people who were interested in personal finance, they weren't at a level where they could invest in stock markets, but they were very focused on their money. And if you think about it, some people like sports, and some people like general news, and some people like food, and some people like a lot of different kinds of things in content, but everybody is interested in money in one way or another. So we're trying to really be the bookends of that category, from the most sophisticated to the most general interest, and it's under an umbrella that encompasses all that we do with our money. We make money, we spend it, we save it, we invest it, and then there are times we have to work our way out of debt. And those are the 5 buckets where CNBC now lives. I know we're going to talk about a program that we're developing with Alex that goes right at the heart of about 4 or 5 of those 5 things. But there is what we're finding to be a very healthy appetite for not only news that's usable in our category, but also content that's entertaining.
Let's talk about that, because I think that also gets to what Alex wants to do in terms of personal finance, the lessons you've learned, and what you believe should be an awareness of how you manage your money at an early age.
Yeah, I mean, I think unlike Caesar and Mark, who have earning power probably till the time they're 80 years old, athletes, it's a very interesting thing that happens with athletes where you have probably 90% of your life earnings from age 20 to 30. So the question obviously is what happens from age 30 to 80. And if you realize that only less than 5% of our Major League Baseball players have a college degree, I'm not a stockbroker, but with that information alone, I would probably short the stock. So we have to, as an industry, give our young men a vehicle that they can protect themselves against themselves. For example, if Caesar comes in from, he went to Penn and he went to Harvard, he comes into the big leagues to our locker room as a young 23-year-old, and there's a bucket that we call it the O bucket, and Caesar has the choice to put 10% of his earnings for his entire career every year. But we have one thing that he has to sign: he cannot touch that money to age 45. And we're simply looking at the numbers saying Caesar is going to make better decisions at the age of 45 than 25. I think if we execute that simple project right there, the numbers from 70% of going bankrupt, we can cut that in half very quickly.
So what is the gist of the show, Mark? Why don't you tell us how it came about and what you're hoping to accomplish?
Well, the program is called Back in the Game, and we're focusing on athletes who have had a dramatic fall from grace financially. It's right in the zone of what Alex is talking about. They made huge amounts of money, and for a whole variety of reasons, they find themselves in their 30s or 40s, or a career that was truncated by injury or something, and now they have a real financial problem. And the idea is to work with them and not only to understand the issues that led to their bankruptcy or their lack of funds, but what can be done to help them build their way out. And sometimes you have to do something big to get people's attention. So it's clearly going to be a program that's going to be interesting to athletes. and those who are interested in sports, but I think it's going to be universally compelling to people. Everyone has a money problem from time to time in their life. Everyone knows someone who's got a money issue. These will be dramatic kinds of life changes that will take dramatic kinds of decisions to get back for these young men to get back on their feet. And that's what we're really focused on. So hopefully it'll be interesting and entertaining and informative ultimately.
Yeah, and I want to add one thing to that, Mark. I mean, I've often heard, and look, I almost spent 23 years in the big leagues, and I often hear, well, how can a player go through $100 million? And that is a fair question, right? That is a fair question. But if you play in New York or LA, it's not 100, it's 50, maybe 47, okay? You haven't paid your manager 10%, you haven't paid your agent 5%, you haven't, your business manager 5%, and you still haven't gone through your first divorce. So, it is possible. I'm sorry.
I think you watched that show.
Now I get it. No, I think what Alex and Mark are doing, I mean, I love it because anything that speaks to empowering different parts of the community so they can feed back and do great things is wonderful, so it's spot on. You know, if it's interesting for us in, you know, speaking it through the lens of the Latino community, you know, when we all think about the demographic growth that we've talked about, the financial health and the financial growth of Hispanics in this country is not only important to Hispanics, it's really important to the United States. We need to make sure that our community, that demographic is growing from a financial perspective. And so, you know, one of the great trends that we've seen is the amount of entrepreneurship, small and medium businesses that are open by Hispanics is skyrocketing. Hispanics are opening small and medium businesses at about 14 or 15 times the rate as the rest of the overall population. By the way, a lot of those small businesses are being started by women. And so we got 4+ million small businesses led by Latinos here in the United States. And so that's great because it's increasing their consumer spending power. But there's also a portion of the population that would love to have that opportunity, but they don't have the financial sophistication. And so one of the things that we've tried to focus on at Telemundo is to create content that speaks to financial empowerment, that speaks to financial health. We launched our community empowerment platform called The Power in You about a year and a half ago. And it offers tools, resources, information that helps people get their arms around ways that they can strengthen their own personal balance sheets so that hopefully over time they can look at these entrepreneurship opportunities and hopefully contribute to the overall economy.
How do you think about growing your market, Cesar, in terms of more viewership? I mean, I know that you signed a recent deal with Vice. Is that to try and get maybe the Vice viewer to watch you or vice versa? How does that work? And are you open to more partnerships with other quote-unquote mainstream media outlets?
Sure. One of the things that we know is the overall media consuming viewer is evolving. And when you go to the subsect of the Hispanic or Latino community, that community is evolving as well. In the old days, the Hispanic community was driven by immigration. Today, yes, we still have immigration, but a lot of the growth is being driven by native-born Latinos who were born here, were educated like Alex and myself here. And so for us, it's important to keep those in mind. And so we like to categorize that emerging part of the Latino of the community as 200%ers. And you've heard us talk about this. They're 100% Latino, but they're 100% American. And it's important to think of them with that particular insight because what it allows us to do is to innovate and create content that speaks more uniquely to them. So with that in mind, what we've tried to do is, that's a generation that is very young, they're multicultural, they're millennial, but they're mobile. And so they have a lot of options, they're looking for their content to be consumed across any platform. And so what we're trying to do is ensure that we are creating content and partnering with digital companies that can bring something to the table and help us and we can help them. And so one of the best things I think we've done is to partner with some digital native leading companies like Snapchat, like BuzzFeed, like Vice. And what they bring to the table for us is they can help Latinos sample or discover some of the unique content that we're creating. What do we, Telemundo, bring to someone like that? We bring that insight, that experience of this demographic to them that allows them to grow their platform. And so up until now, it's been very successful, and we're going to continue to do more of those partnerships.
That sort of younger demographic, the millennial, the person who uses a Snapchat, I'm definitely, none of us are part of that demographic by far, but they get a bad rap, Mark, because apparently they're not interested too much in finance. They think that they can buy, this is what's on Twitter. They think that they can buy avocado toast and still save up for a home. And, you know, these sorts of strange money choices that, you know, I talked to Susie Orman yesterday. She said, they don't set goals. If you don't set a goal today, you're never going to get there by the time you're 40.
Right, but how's the millennial of today different than when we were in our 20s or 30s? It's very hard to put money aside at a very young age, in your 20s, when you're just starting to ramp your financial situation, and you're doing everything you can to, pay the rent on the apartment and the car payment and the insurance on the car, and then it takes a special kind of person, I think, that can make small sacrifices at a young age. Looking forward a full generation or 30 or 40 years. That said, I think there is tremendous interest in entrepreneurship, and we're seeing that through the success of Shark Tank and many other ways. It's almost the in thing that people are interested in being their own boss, doing their own thing. We did a big study at CNBC. We talked to 1,600 people between the ages of 25 to 54, and what we found is that 81% of them don't like their job, which is a staggering 81% don't like their job. But 80% of those 81%, so they, for some reason, and it could be they just don't like the job, life got in the way and they had to do something they didn't want to do, they got a bad boss, they got a lousy commute, for any of a number of reasons. But 80% of the 80% or 65% believe that they can do better. They aspire to do better and they think that they can. And that's what entrepreneurship is. And that's why shows like Shark Tank, like The Profit on CNBC, like Back in the Game will be, taps into this realizable fantasy that people have that they can improve their lot in life. And that's a very exciting thing and a real thing.
Alex, when you decide what sorts of ventures to take on, especially because you're already running a business and you've been running that business for 18 years or so, fitness centers, auto dealerships, real estate, do you think about the demographic? Do you think about how you can reach people, not just through broadcast, but through other, maybe social media, digital, etc.?
Yeah, I mean, we study the business and the metrics at every level. I mean, if you think about the fitness space, and we're very bullish, less than 10% of the people in America have a gym membership. So there's tremendous upside in that space. And one of the things you find is that everybody, like money, everybody wants to live longer, live healthier, be a little thinner, be a little bit more muscular, all of that. So for us, we think that's an advantage. The other advantage that we see in the fitness space is as retail continues to slump, it comes right into our wheelhouse, which we're one of the few people that's going out right now and trying to find 30, 40, and 50,000 square foot boxes. So
we're hearing reports Macy's closing X number of stores, Sears is closing stores, and that's your opportunity.
And we have brokers all over the country calling them for either sublease opportunities, or maybe we're finding leases today that are a fraction of what we were finding 10 years ago, 5 years ago. So that's good for us there. With the noise around Silicon Valley and Tesla, there's some people, if you hang around Stanford and the campus, and have done that an awful lot, people think that their cars would not exist in 3 or 5 years, right? So they believe their own Kool-Aid up there. I happen to think that cars will be here in 10 years. As a matter of fact, the most amount of cars ever sold, new cars, was last year over $17 million. Over 17 million cars. So the industry is still very healthy. Also, your bottom line comes from used cars and service and parts, right? So these, and from an apartment point of view, we only do apartments in the real estate space, and we think there's always going to be room for, our average rent is about $950, and our average buy is probably $75,000 per door. So very secondary, tertiary markets, and we believe in cash flow.
And as you hear Mark and Caesar talk about digital going digital and having digital ventures, et cetera. Do you think about that as well as you have signed a deal with GMA, as you were doing Back in the Game, as you were doing Shark Tank? Do you think about what will Alex Rodriguez do in the digital world to get to that Snapchat generation?
Sure. Well, let me say that every business I'm talking about, there's a huge digital component. And the only way that you can run at a 95% clip in your apartments, or the only way that, you know, if Caesar and Mark came to buy a car, they already know what car, what color, and what price before they walk in the door. Totally different than it was when we grew up. In the fitness space, again, people are just getting smarter, they're clever. This Uber generation, everyone's looking for an edge or a deal, cable network, packages. So as an entrepreneur, you always have to look around the corner. You have to be a forward thinker and think about whether Caesar thinking about what's his competition, or Mark, what's his, you know, our competition lives right in front of us. And digital, whoever figures that out first will be the winner.
I'm glad you mentioned packages, because I think that's what keeps up a lot of executives in the TV business at night in terms of thinking about that skinny bundle. When we heard about ESPN's subscriber growth problems, that really sent a ripple through the industry. Caesar, how do you think about that in terms of having the viewer out there being able to choose, and where that leaves Telemundo and other channels for that matter?
Sure. Look, I would tell you, I think it's clearly something that all of us in the media industry, and Mark and myself included, think a lot about. I'd say two things. One is similar to Alex's auto analogy, which I love. Is, you know, a lot of people have been saying, oh my God, the media industry is declining. People don't watch TV and video, and the reality is, on the contrary, more video viewing occurred last year than ever in the history. Why? It doesn't mean that people are not watching great content. It just means they're watching it in different places and on different devices. And so for us, ensuring that we are in all of the locations, giving as many options as possible for our consumers to consume our content is first and foremost. I think the second comment I'd make is, you know, clearly there is some experimentation with skinny bundles and the like. And what we believe is we need to make sure that, particularly with some of the new digital offerings, that we are present and make our content so unique and so exclusive that every single provider wants to have. Telemundo, CNBC, and the NBCU networks as part of that offering. I can give you one personal example we just went through. YouTube just came out with their mini bundle for the first time. And Telemundo was included as the only Spanish language offering. And the reason that they ended up doing it is because their experience with what Telemundo had been doing in innovative partnerships with them over the last 3 or 4 years, and the experience that they got from their day-to-day YouTube users was that they were looking for this type of original content being made by Telemundo here in the United States for Latinos. And so being one of those options is pivotal to us. Do we know which of these providers is going to be the winner in 3, 5, 10 years? We don't. We just want to make sure that we've grabbed some of that beachfront property while we're still able to.
How do you think about that, Mark? And in terms of CNBC, I mean, we have the advantage of being it's almost like live sports. You don't watch it after the game is over, pretty much, right? You know how this market ended, and you know that's it.
Well,
but in terms of, you know, if you had a viewer choose between watching CNBC streamed on a PC or on a TV, is there a choice? Does it make a difference?
Well, the thing that I would add to what Caesar said is that let me go back. You really can't think of an industry that's not being disintermediated in some way. Every single, I mean, Alex talks about the auto industry. You know every detail of pricing on a car when you go in to buy a car. That changes that business. There is, you think about medicine, you think about everything. So media is not immune from that. Maybe your corner barbershop is not being disintermediated, but short of that, there's not a lot of businesses that aren't. But here's what we know, or here's what we think. We want to be the biggest and we want to be the best. And the best goes to quality and the biggest goes to scale. And if we continue to focus on that, the rest will take care of itself. We really can't anticipate. We can speculate. We can about where the monetization of media will be in 5 years or 10 years, but we don't know for sure. The biggest challenge at the moment is actually counting the use of our content. You there is far more use of the video that's produced by Telemundo and CNBC than there is actual accounting for and then value extracted from the viewing of that video. But that will get worked out at some point. It will get worked out, and there'll be but we don't know how. But you better be the best, and you better work hard every day to continue to evolve what you're doing and to change and to lead. And that's what we're focused on trying to do.
May I add something to Mark, what you said? I want to talk about how it's also influenced our game, baseball. And just to give you a little background, in 1960, 25 million people came out to watch Major League Baseball games. My first year in the Major Leagues was 1994. We had about 50 million people watch us. And today is probably around 75 million. The highest year was 2006. We had 81 million folks come out and watch us play. But if you think about the industry when I came in 1994 was $1 billion. Today, 20-something years later, is at $10 billion. And Commissioner Rob Manfred already says he wants to take it to $15 billion. What these gentlemen do, both Mark and Caesar, influences the value not only of our franchises, but the sport in general. But I want to talk a little bit about how players are being appraised today than where they were when I first started. Players today, you have more physicists and applied mathematics guys from Harvard and Yale and Dartmouth that have never seen a baseball game, that sit in front offices making baseball decisions. So for example, if Mark was a free agent, we would say to the young man in the corner who's never seen a baseball game, what is Mark worth? We want to sign Mark. He'll say, give me 3 seconds. Go into his computer. He says, let's offer Mark 5 years for $75 million. So the GM goes down and gives him $75 million. At 3 o'clock in the afternoon, there's a computer, I used to say a fax. The computer, they send down the scorecard, which is the lineup, is all made through algorithms. At 3 o'clock, you have coaches on their knees on the field, putting tape on the field, and this is where they're supposed to play. Almost like we're playing Atari. The agency, that's what we used to play. But the point I want to say is the pendulum sometimes in business and in sports and in media goes far to right, and that's called an over-adjustment. It happens in hitting, it happens as CEO and chairman, as these gentlemen run their great businesses. But the one element I want to remind everybody, there's still a human element, especially in baseball. You still play 200 games in 232 days, and you need character, and you need grit, and you need toughness to be able to survive every day. And that cannot be appraised in that computer that the young man in the corner is appraising Mark for.
I think it's a great analogy. These guys are worrying about the content. It's similar. You're still playing a great game. I want to ask you, because we have a lot of entrepreneurs in this audience, we are running out of time, but what sort of advice would you give to somebody starting up a business right now, especially as you are going to be sitting in the chair as a shark, evaluating pitches?
Well, I think my advice would be slow and steady wins the race. I sit in the advisory board and with the Yankees with Hal Steinbrenner, and I always tell Hal, you have to give our young players 2,500 at-bats, which is about 5 years, before we jump in and over-evaluate these young kids. These kids get married, they have kids, they mature. We have to be patient with them. I would say the same thing goes for a businessman. You need to acquire your 10,000 hours. It takes time. You have to make mistakes. It's okay to make mistakes, especially when you're in your 20s. But the one analogy that I always tell young athletes, and I'm very passionate about this because it's very disturbing. I'm at an age now where I've been retired and some of my ex-teammates are. And the young man from Omaha with glasses says, I'm going to take that money and I'm going to invest it. And if these two guys come together with similar traits, by the way, then 1 + 1 = 3, 4, or 5. And if more players find gentlemen like this to mentor them, to partner up with them and say, hey, Caesar, if you're putting $10, do you mind if I put a dollar behind it? And by the way, can you also mentor me along the way? Can I join the board calls? And those kind of things, you need humility and you need effort and like everything else. That would be.
And you've done that along the way as well. You've had some terrific mentors who have really helped you along.
Yeah, look, my father left when I was 10 years old. I would not be able to survive without the Boys and Girls Club and with great mentors. I had Lou Piniella, I had Ken Griffey Jr., I had guys like Joe Torre, and in the business world, I've had Warren Buffett, Barry Sternlicht, Mark Mashop. I've had some incredible partners that I call every day or weekly for advice.
You left Warren Buffett, Mark Lazary. How do you call them up? You just say, hey, it's Alex Rodriguez, looking for a mentor.
It's funny. So a lot of people don't know this. So Warren Buffett and I have been in business for over 17 years. In the year 2000, I signed with the Texas Rangers and Tom Hicks, and I see we're running out of time, so I'll make this really quick. We needed the last part of my contract to be insured. So in very Warren Buffett-like form, he said, I will insure it. If you send $4 million before 11 o'clock in the morning, I will insure that money. And it was the last piece of it on a 10-year deal, which is obviously the most expensive one. So Thomas O. Hicks sends the money, he insures me. I get wind of this like 2 years later, and I find out that Warren Buffett has an insurance on me. So I cold called his office, Debbie, who's still his assistant, has been his assistant forever. And I said, hey, I'm in business with Warren Buffett. Do you mind if I have a call with them or something? And literally, they returned my email like 2 days later and said, hey, why doesn't he come up and spend a day with me in Omaha? And I ended up doing that like 5 or 6 years in a row and had some great times with him.
So there's a lesson for you. An extraordinary way to end eMERGE. Thank you so much to all three of you, Cesar Conte, Mark Hoffman.